Good evening, afternoon or morning. Movie Cat is at the microphone, and today I will tell you about the film where the ball became a man's best friend. And no, this is not a biography of Diego Maradona. For your attention is a drama of the year 2000. Cast Away. And in order not to lose this channel, I recommend to subscribe. A FedEx courier arrives at a farm to pick up a package. A girl named Miss Peterson gives the courier a box on which angel wings are depicted and says that she is sending it to a snowy distance. And the next package will be on Thursday. FedEx delivers a package to Mr. Peterson in Russia. He meets the courier at the doorstep. A woman behind him asks who the package is from, to which he replies, "From my wife." Then a FedEx courier delivers another package to someone's house. The woman gives it to the child, and he runs with this package to the FedEx center and hands it to the system analyst, Chuck. He opens the package and says that he sent it to himself from Memphis here to Moscow. Inside the package is a stopwatch that Chuck started before sending, and now it shows the time 87 hours 22 minutes and 17 seconds. Chuck believes that their express delivery service needs to work better and deliver packages much faster, otherwise they will turn into a regular postal service at this rate. Currently, Chuck works in one of the FedEx branches in Moscow in order to optimize productivity and teach employees how to deliver packages to their owners on time. Chuck heads home to Memphis and calls his girlfriend, Kelly, to tell her that he will be arriving in 18 hours. Chuck comes home to America and meets Kelly. The next day, Chuck and Kelly attend their friend's Christmas dinner. During dinner, Chuck's brother asks him if he is going to marry Kelly. Chuck and his girlfriend laugh it off and avoid answering the question, saying that Kelly is not yet ready to get married, as she has not yet moved on from her previous relationship. Chuck realizes that he needs a visit to the dentist, as his tooth begins to ache while eating. Then suddenly Chuck looks at his pager and Kelly realizes that Chuck needs to go to work again. Chuck and Kelly check their plans and agree that Chuck will come back to spend the new year together, and then arrive on January 13th to attend Kelly's PhD. The couple heads to the airport together, and in the car they exchange Christmas gifts. Kelly gives Chuck a family heirloom, an antique pocket watch with a picture of her taped inside. Chuck sets the time on it and says that he will look at her photo on the way and ask Kelly what time is it. Before leaving, Chuck gives Kelly a small gift that looks like a box with an engagement ring and asks her not to open it until he returns. Chuck then flies to Malaysia with 4 flight crew members. During the flight, Chuck sleeps barefoot and is suddenly woken up by violent plane shaking. He goes into the cockpit to check where they are and sees that the pilots have lost their course and cannot communicate with the air traffic controller by radio. One of the pilots asks Chuck to buckle up, as a turbulence zone is expected. Chuck decides to go to the bathroom first to wash up. Suddenly, the plane begins to plummet and Chuck flies into the cargo hold. The pilot catches him, puts him in his seat and gives out a life raft. Then the pilot asks him to put on a vest and not get up. Chuck sees that Kelly's watch is lying on the floor. He unfastens his seatbelt and, without letting go of the life raft, picks up the watch. The pilot sees this and tries to put Chuck back into his seat, but hits his head hard in the process. Chuck sees the water approaching and the plane crashes into the ocean. The plane fills with water and soon Chuck begins to sink. He uses an emergency life raft and manages to surface with it. A severe storm is raging in the ocean and his boat is thrown from wave to wave. Chuck manages to survive the storm, and by morning his boat is washed ashore. Getting out of the boat, he sees that the clock is still with him. Chuck also notices that several FedEx packages have washed up on the shore. He collects the packages, neatly stacks them in one place. With that done, Chuck looks around and finds himself totally alone. The shore is empty and there is no other land in the ocean in sight. With his foot on the sand, Chuck writes the word help in 5-meter letters to attract the attention of planes if they suddenly fly here. He looks at his watch and his first day on the island is over. The next day, he finds more packages and picks them up. Later, he notices coconuts under the palm trees and quenches his thirst with them. Chuck rips open his pants and uses cloth and leaves to make shoes for himself. He then sets out to explore the island and finds a cave. Later, he climbs to the top of the island to get a better view. From above, Chuck sees something in the water and quickly goes downstairs to look, but to his horror, it turns out to be the dead body of the pilot who tried to save him. Chuck pulls the body ashore and inspects the corpse. He removes his shoes from the body, and in his pocket he finds still working flashlight. Chuck digs a grave and places the pilot's body in it. His second day on the island soon ends. At night, he continues to stare at the photograph of Kelly in the watch. On the third night, Chuck sees a ship far from the island. He calls for help, but alas, the distance is too great for his voice to reach the ship. Then Chuck starts waving his flashlight on, but that doesn't help either. To save his life, Chuck decides to catch up with the ship. He gathers his things and sails on a damaged boat in the hope of reaching the ship. But two strong waves simply turn him over. Chuck hurts his leg on a coral reef and returns to the island. It starts to rain heavily, and to take cover, he hides in a cave. There, Chuck finds a small stream and begins to drink from it. After that, he falls asleep. The next day, Chuck opens the packages, hoping to find something useful in it. In one of the boxes, he finds a volleyball. In other packages, he found a pair of skates, a dress, and half a dozen videotapes. Using skates as a knife, he breaks coconuts, and the dress he uses to catch small fish. Chuck opens all the boxes except one, which has a sticker with angel wings on it. Chuck wants to keep it as a motivation to stay alive and then deliver the package to its addressee. Over time, Chuck builds himself a small tent and tries for many hours to start a fire. Suddenly, the stick slips out of his hands and Chuck severely cuts his palm. In a rage, he throws everything that catches his eye in all directions, and he screams loudly. A few minutes later, he finds a bloody handprint on a volleyball. Chuck draws a grimace on it and puts the ball in front of him to give the impression that he is not alone. Gradually, Chuck begins to talk to the ball. For example, he asks the ball, does he have the matches accidentally? After some time, Chuck finally manages to light the fire. With the help of a pointed stick, Chuck catches a crab, roasts it on a fire, and talks to the ball all the time. He names the ball Wilson because it was made by Wilson's company. The next day, his tooth starts to hurt badly. Chuck uses a skate blade and a stone to pull out a bad tooth and is knocked unconscious. 4 years have passed. Wilson becomes an important part of Chuck's life and in some ways supports him. One day, Chuck wakes up from a strange noise and finds a broken piece of a plastic door on the shore. He decides that he can use this door as a sail. During his stay on the island, Chuck created something like a calendar. It's February by his reckoning, and he tells Wilson that they can get off this island in April. When the waves help them, Chuck starts building a wooden raft. From the soft palm bark, he makes ropes to tie the trees together. When he runs out of these ropes, he uses cassette tapes, but there are still not enough of it. He then goes to the top of the island and retrieves the makeshift noose he had previously prepared for his own suicide. Chuck finishes building the raft. It's time to sail. Chuck takes the package with angel wings, ties Wilson to the raft and sets off. He fights the waves and keeps the raft afloat. Chuck is happy and spends a large number of days on this raft in the hope that he will be able to return home. All the while, Chuck is drinking rainwater and fishing for food. One night, it starts to rain heavily and Chuck holds on to a raft to save his life. When the storm subsides, the raft is in very bad shape and Chuck is unable to find Wilson. He calls the ball, which has been his only friend for over 4 years. Chuck starts to panic and then sees Wilson floating close to the raft. Then he jumps into the water to save Wilson. With one hand, Chuck reaches out to Wilson, and with the other he tries to hold the raft. At the same time, Wilson further moves away from Chuck. He tries desperately but can't get to Wilson. While trying to save the raft, Chuck misses Wilson and weeps bitterly over the loss of the only friend he had in these 4 years. Chuck gets sick and can't even move. When the whale splashes water on him, Chuck opens his eyes, turns around and sees a huge freighter sailing by, and at that moment, Chuck realizes that he is saved. 4 weeks later, Chuck flies home to meet his family and Kelly. His friends say that they buried him a long time ago because they thought that Chuck was dead. Chuck later meets a man who introduces himself as Kelly's husband. He tells Chuck that Kelly is very emotionally shaken and therefore cannot meet him. Friends and family throw a return party for Chuck After the party is over, Chuck tries to sleep, but he can't lie in bed. Chuck lies on the ground and looks at the very watch that Kelly once gave him and still can't sleep without talking to her. He takes a taxi and goes to her house. Just as Chuck is about to ring the doorbell, Kelly opens and invites him inside. Chuck wants to say something, but Kelly immediately hugs him. Chuck hands her the watch she gave him, and Kelly is surprised to see that he still has it. Since this is a family heirloom, Chuck wants the watch to stay in her family, and he only takes out her photo as a keepsake. Kelly then reveals to him that she left his car after he went missing. She hands him the car keys. Chuck gets behind the wheel. Suddenly Kelly calls Chuck and runs to him. Chuck gets out of the car and they kiss each other. Kelly says that after 4 years without Chuck, she had to let him go, but she always loved him and always will. Chuck replies that he loves her too, but knows that they will never be able to be together again. After, Chuck decides to deliver by car the only package that he did not open on the island. He stops at the house, knocks on the door, but no one comes out, so Chuck leaves a package with angel wings. Chuck also attaches a note: "This package saved my life. Thanks, Chuck Noland." On the way back, Chuck stops to look at a map. He thinks where to go next. Suddenly, a strange woman stops her car and asks if she can help him. Chuck asks her for the right road. The woman answers his question and returns to her car. As she leaves, Chuck notices the same angel wings on the back of her truck, the same wings that were on the box he never opened on that island. Thank you for watching. I will never go traveling with Tom Hanks. Write this phrase in the comment if you know this meme. Also press your fingers up and subscribe to the channel.